it's Jennifer from Belladonna's Botanicals, and as I've talked about in several videos recently, is that I've been doing a lot of ancestor work, ancestor, not only that, but ancestral trauma healing and integration. Um, this has been a very unexpected journey for me. Just a little bit before I kind of get into some of it because it got wild fast. Wild and unknown very quickly. So, um yeah, it's so when I talk about my ancestors, like, and when I how I identify myself, my recent ancestry is quite recent. So I'm still trying to piece together a lot on my father's side is all like Ukrainian, Slovak, Eastern European, and that borders changed a lot. So, you have a lot of different, every document and every resource has a different location on it. Or like as far as the nationality goes, sometimes it's Ukrainian, sometimes it's Slovak, sometimes it's Ruthenian, sometimes it's Polish. In one case, it was Yugoslavia because I think they got it confused with Czechoslovakia. So, but very much that part of the world, with a few things, with that's where my Ashkenazi Jewish side comes from, and that missing fifth generation, which I talk about a little bit in the Lilith as a closed practice video. So um it's right now that part is a little bit difficult because this is what I'm running into. These people all have the same name and they're five different people versus these are five different names but all the same person. So it's just a lot of like cross-referencing and matching things up. But I've always identified myself as a third generation Ukrainian living in America. I don't call myself an American. I never have, and I never will. I live here. I was born here, technically from here, but I am not of here. And that's something I've thought about as I've been working with my ancestors. Regardless of where they were from, they're Ukrainian. So whether their birth certificate says, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Ukraine, um, where they're from, they're Ukrainian. Where they live doesn't matter. Even where they born doesn't matter. They were Ukrainian. That is their nationality, that is their cultural heritage, and that is their identity. I'm not only Ukrainian because I do have a mother, and we'll get to that. I do have a fairly significant, much more than I realized, amount of Pennsylvania Dutch, Germanic background. Most of my family's been here. Some actually were here a little bit earlier than I thought. But I mean, the PA Dutch, I don't know the whole, I need to learn more about that history. And apparently, I think I might be related to every single person from Baden-Württemberg, Germany, because it seems like most of my ancestors came from that area. Um, yeah. So now on my mom's side, admittedly, we don't know a whole lot. Like I never knew anything beyond my grandparents, beyond my aunt and uncles. That's it. I met one great aunt of my grandfather, but we really don't know much of that history. So I started plugging some stuff. I've been usually mostly working with Ancestry right now because a big part of this is of understanding who I am and integrating all of this ancestral stuff. I need to know who these people are first and just start building out the stories. And I I can't find much on my Irish great grandparents, and I have their names and I think my great grandmother's names. Well, actually, just no, my great grandmother, the Irish one. So, and Keating is a fairly common Irish name, so I can't find anything beyond that. I know that my great grandmother died fairly young, I think when my grandmother was 14. So my grandmother had raised like six or seven children by the time she got married and had children of her own because she was the oldest. But after her mother died, they moved down to Pennsylvania from Canada. So, which is interesting, because apparently, which I didn't realize, that on my grandmother's father's side, the Pennsylvania was also Pennsylvania Dutch. I just thought like standard run-of-the-mill German, but no, more PA Dutch. A lot of farmers and stuff. But there was family that lived here in Pennsylvania, so that's why they moved here. I did not know that. Um, Now, where it gets interesting is with my maternal grandfather's line. I had no freaking clue, and I've been blowing my mom's mind with this for like the past few weeks. I keep texting her every day, like, "Holy shit! Just found this out." And I started getting on Ancestry on their oops necklace thing on Ancestry's app. It's not on their website for whatever reason, but it's on their app. Every day it updates at around 8 or 9 p.m., 8 or after 8 p.m. in the evening. And you'll get a little thing that'll show on like your the homepage there of, let's see, who of your famous ancestors. And I'm like, so I started getting interesting things. I was like, huh, I didn't know this. And as I was plugging more and more people in, and I got back, like on my mom's side, I've got ancestry like plugged in ancestry going back to like maybe about the mid 1400s. So, but when I started getting, I started having some questions. This one's at least on my grandmother's side, but I had no idea that Dwight D. Eisenhower is a distant cousin. He is my half eighth cousin, three times removed. Um, and for those who may not have heard, he's the was the 34th president of the United States. And an interesting sidebar to that, and this is one of those, huh, heh, universal things of. So now, Dwight Eisenhower is a distant cousin of mine, and in World War II, my former husband's grandfather was the British technical attaché to Dwight Eisenhower. That's a little hinky to me, universe. Like, what are the odds? No, legit, what are the odds? Um, and I started getting more and more of these interesting things popping up. I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've got, you know, let's see, how far back did I start saving these? I've got this one. Oh, James A. Eakin, who was a Union general and served during the American Civil War. He also served on some. I forget. I have to look. He served on some commission um, after Abraham Lincoln's assassination regarding that. But what's interesting about it is I took screenshots of some of these. Is like it'll show you on here like with this James Eakin. I have a 10th great grandmother, and that kind of shows you the down the line of how who how you're related to them. I think I took more pictures there. Let's see. So we've got James Eakin. He is my half sixth cousin, five times removed. And we've got Isaac Chauncey, half fifth cousin, six times removed. And he was an accomplished U.S. Navy serving in the quasi war, Barbary Wars, and the War of 1812. And I started noticing like there's a lot of very prominent military figures in here too. And I've been Googling things and looking, I'm like, huh, where is this coming from? I got another Ralph Pomeroy Buckland. He's my half fifth cousin, six times removed, and he was a Union general during the American Civil War. And I'm like, okay, cool. At least, my family's built mostly on the right side of history here. And let's see, we got to where I started getting interesting on this side was This one was George Wheeler. He's my half seventh cousin, five times removed. So when I looked up George Wheeler, I was like, "Ooh, this sounds." He was a prominent American explorer who extensively surveyed and documented the Western United States in the late 19th century. And what's interesting here is that, I mean, he mostly was doing like topological, geological surveys, like mapping the terrain of the West during the 19th century. And there were three other explorers, surveyors who did similar things. All four of those surveys got rolled up into what now is the USGS, the United States Geological Services, or whatever it stands for. But you're welcome, your earthquake prone areas. But it was just getting more and more interesting that I was getting. Sorry, I'm looking through it because I took a lot of screenshots because it doesn't save very well. Um, Oh, also discovered there's a local town called nearby called Trexler Town. We're related to it's not a town that was per se settled and founded in the traditional sense. It was the Jeremiah Trexler, I believe, was the one. He had a tavern, and when they started building roads, from Philly to, the area, um, they decided to name the area that the main road went through after him because he owned a tavern, you know. So, I've just found this really fascinating. I've I'm related to some suffragette who is my half seventh cousin, two times removed. Um, so I was like, huh, like all of this stuff. Okay, so we're related to a president, and I've got more stuff. One of the founding fathers who like literally signed the Declaration of Independence, and I'm like, what the literal fuck? Like, how do we not know any of this? So as I'm going through and plugging in, the various things, and where all of this comes in is, let me switch back to here. So once I go into my grandfather's side, and my grandfather was just my maternal grandfather. And he was just a quiet World War II vet who sat in his recliner, smoking his Chesterfield's filterless cigarettes and drinking his Chesterfield ale. And like, I mean, knew my grandfather, but like, he was just quiet, unassuming. My grandparents didn't have a lot of friends. Very, very, very blue collar. I think he worked in a cigar store and also for the sewer company in Allentown. Very unassuming people, very quiet people, very reserved people, very, I would not have expected all of this to have come from that side of the family. And I was curious as to what the literal fuck. So as I started going up the family tree, I get to my a great great grandfather on that side, and by way of marriage, now, like I said, we're very Pennsylvania Dutch on that side, and I'm like, oh, so this is where all of this stuff is coming from. Yeah, this family line from the Bennett family line. Um, and it gets weird fast because as I started plugging in and going up these different lines. So as I go up the line further and further and get to the start, I discover that the Bennett line originates from Puritan separatist family called the Aldens, who came over here on the Mayflower. They were like, captain military people, but it starts getting weird and interesting, and I didn't know a whole lot of this because as I was kind of going through and plugging people in, I was like, huh, we have some ancestors who lived in in Salem, Massachusetts at the time of the Salem Witch Trials. And guess fucking what? One of the Alden descendants, so probably something like the Puritan separatist Alden, is my 12th great grandfather, um, who lived in between 1573 and 1620. Um, so yeah, there's that. So one, I'm trying to figure out the relational structure here, but there's of the Alden family who came over on the Mayflower. Um, One of them, as I discovered, I was like, huh. I was like, all right, so I have some ancestors who lived in Salem, Massachusetts during the time of the witchcraft trials. Huh. I wonder. So I googled the names of the victims and the accusers and the acquitted and everyone involved in it, the victims, everything. And I cross-referenced it, and I was like scanning, I was cross-referencing it with some of the names. And I was like looking down the list, and I was like, hmm, John Alden Jr. Wonder if that's a relation to the Alden who is my 12th great grandfather. Well, son of a bitch. Turns out that's true. So I'm trying to figure out in the relational structure where John Alden Jr. fits. It might be in, like, say, a 10th or 11th generation great grandfather, but I hate saying this because, okay, so I'm going to lose some witchcraft points here, and I'm sorry. But number one, I've always found the Salem witchcraft trials to be bullshit. I don't think there was really any magic happening there. I think it was purely political. At best, ergot poisoning, but purely political land grab and such. Point number one, and we will get back to that. Point number two is every single time I have seen anyone say or post anything that's like, we're the granddaughters of the witches you couldn't burn. And I've just been like, if I rolled my eyes any harder, they would just fly out my head. Legit. Like, I've always just been like, ugh, that's so cheesy. That's like the live, laugh, love of witchcraft, you know? Well, son of a bitch, I got some egg on my face because apparently, I am a great granddaughter of someone who survived a witchcraft trial. I don't think the person was practicing magic per se, but let's get into where this gets interesting. And this brings up a whole lot of questions here for me. So I'm gonna assume, like, at Mayflower level colonizers here, of which I've spent 50 years on the planet and never knew these people existed. So we've got that. But do you want to know why? And the whole story, the story of how whatever great grandfather was accused of witchcraft and arrested and jailed during the Salem witchcraft trials, is that the Alden family were kind of playing both sides against the middle during the various like the French Indian War, the I think King Philip's War, something like that, when colonists were, actively warring, genociding with the Native Americans in the area. And up in that area, I believe, is more. I know I'll get to the Wampanoag of it all at some point. There's another tribe that was up there that they were selling weapons and supplies to the I think, hold on. Let me see if I can find the name of the tribe. And we're back, and I just lost the screen again, so I don't remember the name of the thing. It appears to be they were selling weapons, including the to the Native American tribes like the Wabanaki, possibly. I have to look into this because honestly, This is one of the things too. I find American history to be just so boring. I I don't like colonial art. I don't like the fashion. I don't like anything about American history and have like just not learned any of it. So I'm a little lacking on stuff because I've just always found like the colonial American history, like pre-colonial American history, that's fine. Just that once we get to like the Mayflower landing, I'm just like, ugh, this is awful and boring and like the fashion stuff. And I went to art school, so that's why I'm talking about the art and fashion part of it, because that would have been what I would have been more interested in studying. So basically, this great grandfather Alden was accused by Mercy Lewis of witchcraft because I guess it was known that he colluded with the Native American tribes in selling them weapons. And her family's, wherever her family, their village was raided. And, you know, a lot of things happened there. I'd have to go and look specifically at the details, but, you know, it sounds like the village was burnt to ground, people were murdered, it was bad. So she was the one who accused John Alden Jr. of witchcraft. And it goes, I mean, if you go into the Wikipedia and then there's a another page, I'm like, it goes into like full detail of like all the shit that happened. Like, you know, he was interrogated, he was jailed. There were so many people in jail in Salem at the time. They actually had to take him, put him in jail in Boston. And at some point, he was busted out of jail, escaped, and was on the lam, staying with different parents. Interesting part about that is that he was busted out of jail about like literally like probably days before Giles Corey was pressed to death during and executed. So um once the hysteria of it died down, he kind of turned himself in, but there was no one to testify against him at this point, so he was acquitted. So thereby, now I've got some connection to the Salem Witch Trials in that a great grandfather of the 12th generation was accused, arrested, and tried for witchcraft and acquitted. That's some interesting shit. So I've just been looking through and looking at the stories and linking things together. And like, as I stumble upon names, as I stumble upon like your famous ancestor, I've been going through and, researching things. And it's just, I started to notice a pattern that was fascinating. And this is something I'm currently in the process of exploring more is something with that line, like I don't know what it is, but it seems to be like there's pinnacles. Like we are some kind of like watchers, or like we are, I don't know how to describe it, because like okay, you've got the Mayflower, you've got the Salem witchcraft trials, you've got Eisenhower in World War II, you've got all these big things, like big monumental shifts in like not just, yeah, like wars happen, shit happens, this that and the other thing. But it seems to be like there's this presence at times of massive change and upheaval. And I'm sure you could say that for any generation, but like, how many people's, great grandparents, are survivors of the Salem witchcraft trials, that kind of thing. So I'm exploring that a little more because the universe is up to something. Because that whole Eisenhower thing I mentioned earlier, that's a little sus. Like, not gonna lie, little sus. Um, so as I'm looking through this family line and things, because a lot of what we talk about, I probably mentioned it on this channel too a lot, is especially modern witchcraft times, we're hearing like decolonize your practice, decolonize this, colonizer that, and all this, and it's really got me thinking, because now, as I discovered when we get further down that line, I've got two great grandmothers of the eighth and ninth generation who are Wampanoag Indians, or Wampanoag indigenous. I don't know, but I didn't know that. So now here's what the question I posit. We talk about this whole like colonizer, decolonizing, and practices and closed practices and cultural appropriation and whatnot. And looking at that whole that just that one line of the family that married into our otherwise unassuming, PA Dutch family farmers. That's like, I mean, we're talking like peak Mayflower colonists here. Like there's no getting around that. Um, but as I'm looking at it, it's like I'm seeing a pattern though of like, okay, this is not so great, but then there's like a redemption arc, story arc in here. And like with now we can look at this and assume the worst case scenario or the best case scenario. So I've got two indigenous great grandmothers. Are you just going to assume that they were great grandmothers by means of untoward sexual forceful relations, or is it something different? Now, there's a vast difference between below the Mason-Dixon line and above the Mason-Dixon line. Like up here, a lot of Amish and a lot of PA Dutch married indigenous women to keep them from being marched through the Trail of Tears or genocided. So I don't know. I don't really know what to do with that either. It's a lot. And I don't know a whole lot about the Wampanoag tribe. It sounds like from what I've been reading, this is, me and my ADHD deep dives and whatnot. So this has been sucking up a lot of my late night insomnia time is now genealogical research time. I suppose that's better than scrolling through like TikTok reels and stuff. So now she married, the indigenous woman married, one into the one. It's kind of an interesting annex. Like I've got a few more names attached to it, but the first level one, she was married to one ancestor, and he passed away, so that she remarried again, I believe, into uh I guess I'm guessing into the Wampanoag tribe. I don't know. I'm still researching that part. The records are some are more complete, some are less. Like I think it was her and she had a sister, but I know her name, but like her sister's just listed as like Indian woman, Wampanoag woman, something like that. So there's some things there that have to be cleared out. Now, where it becomes interesting for me and being respectful of other cultures and my own and in my own ancestral healing and understanding of things, that's part of my ancestry. That's part of my history, my familial history. I can't ignore it for reasons of cultural appropriation or whatever, decolonize this, colonizer that. I'm like, it's proven to me that nothing is black and white and that there's always hope for a redemption arc in any family line. And there's some people in this line who were, but even so, like there was one I was reading. I'm gonna jump ship over to here. So I have a famous ancestor, Rebecca Bruton Mott. She's my third cousin, 8 times removed. And she was, a prominent figure during the American Revolution, known for support of the patriot cause and her instrumental role in providing intelligence and blah blah blah. Well, what she also, I don't know how this one gets in the mix. I haven't gotten to where this is in the family line, but yeah, she was a plantation owner, owned a lot of slaves, one of the wealthiest women in South Carolina. So, that sounds pretty terrible, actually. But then you look at the stuff during the Revolutionary War. She burned her like plantation down, to I guess in the war effort or something. So it's kind of like you're. I'm starting to see this dynamic of, people who have survived and done what needs to be done to survive too. And like burning down your own house, your own mansion, your own plantation, and it doesn't, I mean, I have to look up more on her, but like it still just kind of brings up a different lens in which we're looking at history. And a lot of times we're looking at these things through just such black and white, kind of like colonizer colonized, and that, all the colonizers are evil, wicked people and yeah, bad stuff. And then this, but then you start to see these stories and it's, it's wild. It's really like here's another one I pulled up. I'm related to Oliver Walcott. He is my half fourth cousin, 8 times removed. Well, he's a signer of the Declaration of Independence, who served as a prominent political figure in Connecticut and played a key role in shaping early American government governance. So I find it fascinating that, somehow this very unassuming part of my family, very quiet, very reserved, very, I mean, my grandparents were kind of, my experience of my grandparents growing up, my grandmother had her, not couch, but like her chair by the TV. My grandpa was in his recliner, and they hated each other apparently, which I learned later. But um, they were just quiet, unassuming people. They didn't really, they weren't social people. My grandmother's social life was reading 2 murder mystery novels a week until the day she died. Um, and so we come from avid readers apparently, but yeah, I mean, just very low key kind of people. Like I would never have expected this from that family line, just saying. So let's see. Oh, I'm also related to Lemuel Crawford, who is my half fifth cousin, 6 times removed. I do not know what these. I'm not sure what the designation of removed is. I don't know offhand. But Lemuel Crawford was an Alamo defender who fought bravely during the Battle of the Alamo and survived as one of the few defenders still alive after the battle. So we seem to survive a lot of crap. Yeah, I mean, it's wild, I guess, like when you start looking at this stuff, because I had no idea. I had no freaking idea any of this was anywhere. So now is what do I do with that awareness of it? Like working with that ancestral line. Because I mostly work with my Ukrainian ancestral line. Because I just don't know any of these people. I don't have a lot of my grandparents. Like they did not like their pictures being taken. So like I think we have like one picture of my grandparents together, and my mom was still a kid at the time. Like I found a picture maybe from my mom and dad's wedding. I was like, oh, is that grandma? We didn't know. And it's like I've been sending this stuff to my mom. Like we're just like she finds it fascinating. She's like, well, as long as we aren't related to Trump or Hitler, I'm good. I'm like, that's the spirit, mom. But this has just been a fascinating journey for me because we don't know a whole lot about our family. And it's a little harder on the Ukrainian side because now I've got multiple languages to decipher and church records and synagogue records and marriage and every last name has like 5 different spellings, you know, even the first names sometimes are different. It's kind of like if you looked at I may have said at the beginning of the video, I don't remember, but like if you look at it, it's like if it's Anna Smith, Anna Smith, Anna Smith, Anna Smith, Anna Smith, these are all 5 different people. Or Anna Smith, Anna Smythe, Anna Smith, Anna Smith, Anna Smitty. Those are all the same person, just with variations of the last name spelling. Um, I was just using those names for an example. But so it's harder finding some of that information, or I've got to piece things together from other documents. Like I can look at, oh, I found so and so's obituary. Okay, so this verifies, this relationship. Like the one of the ones I found for my mom's grandfather. Well, after her grandmother passed away very young and they moved here, I was like, did your grandfather get remarried? She's like, oh. I'm like, well, because the obituary says survived by blah 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 blah, which were all family names, and wife so and so. But, his first wife would have died many decades earlier. And my other grandma, my mother never knew her other grandmother because she died very young too. So she knew her step grandmother. This has just been a wild and unexpected ride. Like, I don't know what else. I'm still working on this. I'm still digging through and trying to like piece together like what the hell else am I gonna find in this one family line? It's that the Bennett line married into the PA Dutch singer line, and now we've got a very different history because looking at the rest of my grandparents' ancestry, it's all people from Baden-Württemberg, Germany, pretty much, or like bordering areas that were in Switzerland and France. But yeah, it was all PA Dutch. So I don't know, seemed to be just unassuming farmer people. Um, I'm still working through some of that, and you know, like, piecing together the Eastern European part's a little harder because sometimes what you have to look at the where the history intersects and there's not records of things is, well, number one, the former Soviet Union, um what am I looking? Not only did things get destroyed, but a lot of things were kind of like buried. So you didn't really learn about the Holodomor until after the Soviet Union fell, and that was, what the genocide on the Ukrainian farmers during the Stalin era. That was something I don't remember hearing about that until more recently. Then I mean, it just wasn't something that was known, and millions of people died. It was a genocide. It was a legit genocide. What's happening now in Ukraine is a legit genocide. I have ancestors who like this is where it gets so complicated, and there's no clear-cut way to say, decolonize this, or you're bad because, you're a colonizer, or you had relatives who did X, Y, and Z, or were here. I'm like, I've got an entire missing fifth generation of ancestors on my dad's side because there's just either no records of them or they didn't exist or they ceased to exist en masse. And that's when, prior to that, we're listed as Ashkenazi Jewish, and then missing generation, and then we're more Slavic and Balkan. Now that happens to coincide with the um, fall of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth around 1790s, something like that, where Catherine the not so great actually shipped all the Jewish people off to various into Russia, and they're probably not existing anymore. So it's like being on both sides of the spectrum, like realizing that I have ancestry that goes back in this country to the freaking Mayflower and like the founding fathers and all that crap. Um, I still don't feel any connection to it. I have never felt connected to America, to this land. Maybe Pennsylvania more so than other areas, just because at least now I know a lot of my ancestors have been here for a long time. But I don't really feel very much. I still feel like a third generation off the boat Ukrainian who happened to be born in America because that's what I was raised with. I was raised as pretty much I was raised as a Ukrainian child. It's not that I was raised by, some well-to-do. My grandparents were very not well-to-do, but I wasn't raised by any of those people in that line. And we're only that it's just that bloodlines and family lineages merge, and we have no control over that. Otherwise, if that line had not entered in there and that grandfather married someone else or married, another, you know, PA Dutch, none of that would exist. And this is at the great grandfather level. This isn't at like way down the line when we're talking about a 12th level or 12th generation great grandfather kind of thing. So that's where I'm at, and I work more with my Ukrainian ancestors. 'Cause I at least, have pictures of them and more artifacts and more familial heirlooms and things than I don't really have much from my other grandparents. I have a geode from the Gobi Desert that was my grandfather's, and some other minerals or some other like agate slices. And gee, we wonder why Jen's into crystals. Yeah, because my grandfather was into rocks and stuff like that, and apparently, the Wheeler ancestry was also into geological crap. So, it's like sometimes these things do kind of have points of making sense. But what do I do with all this now? Because this is all like could not possibly be more different in its in every aspect of it, in the families and whatnot. I've got, I mean, as far as I know, one of my Ukrainian great grandfathers came from a large family in Skol, Ukraine. Well, where are the rest of us? Because everyone with my last name can fit in a minivan. So when you look at the time frame of when my ancestors came over here from Eastern Europe, most of them came over in like the late 1910s. Some of them in the earlier part of 1900. I would say between like 1905 and maybe 1918. Now, let's think about that. 1918 is really, really a key year. This is the Russian Revolution. This is yet again Russia fucking Ukraine. World War One. We leads into World War Two and the Holocaust and the Holodomor and the Stalinist, purges in Russia and the Soviet bullshit oppression and all of that. And if there's any tanky Stalinists watching, get fucked. Yeah, it's my new favorite hobby is triggering tankies. I like to trigger them just so I can block them. Because their only entire retort is, sorry, I'm on a tangent here. Stalinist tankies are some leftists that are pro-Stalin communists. So I just like to trigger them and watch them melt down and oh well the CIA propaganda blah blah blah. Like I've legitimately watched these fucking idiots tell people and this is a lot online because I am in contact with a lot of people who do live in Ukraine, or I follow them on social media and stuff. I've legitimately watched these people tell these communist, leftist, pseudo leftist people. I've watched them tell people that their lived experiences are fake, that their grandparents didn't suffer and die during the Holodomor or anything like that, or they didn't lose family members. Like, so I am okay triggering them, and I love to do so, and I'm honoring my ancestors by doing so. So it's like the story. You can't really hold on. Let me flip the camera because this is relevant to a story. So you see that picture? Not Arachne, that one. Those are my great 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 grandparents. So back when I lived in Philly, I was dating this anarcho-communist writer, and one of the time this was towards the end of our relationship. I think yeah, because I had started getting my ancestor altar much more when the war started in 22. That's why I really started connecting with my ancestry a lot more than I had previously. Like I've always been fascinated in genealogy. Like I've had my 23andMe since like 2016. I've done this research over the years. So that's nothing new. But there was one that there was so it was after that. So I must have just set the ancestor altar up, and I had that. That's a fairly heavy frame. It was hanging on the wall, and it was towards the end, like when we were in that, breaking up phase, and he was over the one time, and it just came flying off the wall, and like down onto the altar, smashed a bunch of shit. It literally as if my great grandparents were saying, "Not on our watch, girl. You are not dating no dirty, dirty commie bastards." I thought that was funny because I just kind of like I was like walking through my living room a couple weeks. I was like, ah! Oh, I get it now. Good one. So our ancestors watch out for us. Um, and I've loved working with them, and now that I have an entire different ancestry to explore, connecting with that as well. And am I going to run around and be like, "Ooh, my great grandmother was a Cherokee princess"? That's another one of the the granddaughters of the witches that didn't, yeah, whatever. That's another one of those witchy tropes that gets thrown around. My grandmother was a Cherokee princess. I'm like, sure, sure. I'm not of that ilk, obviously. So, it's something I want to explore further. Because yeah, that is part of my ancestry. And that person, as our bloodlines and lineages mixed, now they've got their whole, ancestry that's attached to ours. So, and vice versa. So, things get complicated. So I ask this when we're talking about, and this comes up in a lot of, and I'm not just talking online spaces, in books I read, it's always talking about cultural appropriation and closed practices and decolonize this and decolonize that. And what I ask is people to realize, and I talk about this a lot on this channel, is two things: nuance and discernment. There is a very big difference between those things. I was not raised in a colonizer kind of manner. I was raised in more of an Eastern European quasi PA Dutch manner. And you know how I know the difference? Because like my great grandfather, I married a colonizer kind of family. And it was very different than what I grew up with and what everything I knew. And I did not fit into that structure at all. No shade to them. Very patriarchal, very different. Eastern European families, very matriarchal. Like my lineage is loud women and the quiet men they married. They may not have been like the money breadwinners, but they wore the pants for the whole house. Like my mom and I were talking about the others. It's just like, yeah, it always felt like your grandmother was just like the matriarch of the entire family. And I'm like, oh no, she was matriarch of the entire universe that no one else knew. We talk about, it's often you see people joke that the world's gone to shit, when after David Bowie and Prince died in 2016, but my grandmother also died in 2016, so she may have just been the glue holding the universe together. Uh, I kid, of course. Um, but yeah, that's how I was raised. I don't need feminism because I was raised in a matriarchal environment. I've always struggled with feminism because I don't even fit in there all that well. Like, yeah, it's a whole thing. And that's a tangent for another day. But all of this is really interesting in putting my story together and understanding who I am and seeing maybe how like some of these things all fit together. Because I also have that wonderful, wacky, pattern matching autism, so I'm having fun with the trees. I'm gonna I bet you genealogy was invented by someone with autism. That seems like something we would totally have invented and be like, I wonder if we can map this all out and see how everything interconnects. Because that's my jam. I love that shit. But yeah, so what I'm saying here is when we're looking at these things is realizing that we can approach looking at our ancestors, however long they've been in this country. I still feel like that we're more of recent ancestors because on our little chunk of the family side, we kind of are. Um, but that one marriage changed the entire spectrum of our family lineage. So, did I have any control over my great great grandparent father and who he married and the family he married into? No. And we can look at it one way. Did that colonizer marriage sully our family bloodline, or did it heal hers? It was that the redemption. Because we have to look at things in all story arcs should have a redemption. If not, I mean, some won't, but we can't always look at things as good or bad, like in the binary of good or bad, good or evil, in that black and white thinking kind of way. because that's what's getting us in trouble in a lot of areas is we're not seeing the nuance and we're not understanding like and I love the conversations I have with people, especially now more of the in-person things. And I was talking, I was at an event of maybe last month or a couple months ago. And I was talking to, we were kind of having a wonderfully nuanced and deep discussion, a little bit about cultural appropriation stuff and like closed practices. And it's like there were two women of color there, and they both quipped something, and I was like, huh, I never thought of that. She's like, they were like, yeah, we don't get why y'all we don't get why you guys are like all like have this guilt over your ancestry and like this whole thing like you didn't come here and colonize the United States. You didn't genocide us. You didn't enslave us. You didn't. I'm like you're not responsible for the crap your ancestors did. I was like, huh. I'm gonna sit with this and think about it. And now that I'm in this, sorry, my body is uncomfortable. Now that I'm in this ancestral healing and exploration and genealogical research, that stayed with me. I'm kind of like, am I responsible for the shit that people I didn't know existed until like 2 days ago did? I'm not doing it. Um, I've always been like, am I perfect? No. But I'm like, I live by the everyone should have the ability to redeem themselves, or they should have the redemption arc, and they should have the chance to do better. Because I haven't always done better. I've done stupid shit in my life. I've said bullshit, offensive things, and done crappy things at times. But I've always tried to do better from there. If someone said, "Oh, that thing you did was, problematic because of XYZ reason," okay, well, let's course correct and do better. Let's learn a thing. Let's do a thing. And so that's what I do. Then I just keep on keeping on until I can no longer keep on. So I'm always going to be trying to do better and understand things because, according to my therapist, I approach everything in life like I'm doing dissertation research. So, yeah. But this is all, I'm still processing a lot of this, and this is all very new to me, and I'm still piecing things together. Uh, I wish I had more of my maternal grandparents, but like I just don't have like my uncle still like after they passed, my uncle, still lives in the house and stuff like that. So it's not like we had to like pack up and get rid of all their things. Although my grandfather had some interesting things from World War II. I'm like, yeah, I remember Grandpa used to have a grenade on his like side table. I think it was a deactivated one, but like I just remember playing with a grenade when I was a kid. And allegedly, according to my mom, her brothers told her that he has some pictures from World War II of like he was stationed in Papua New Guinea, but maybe we'll get into the World War II thing next, because that's an interesting kind of story there too. But apparently, he has pictures of headless corpses from the war. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Her brothers told she never saw him, but her brothers told her so, allegedly. Um, But yeah, like what I've noticed is like there's a lot of military like in my family. Like every single my all of both of my grandfathers, all of my great uncles on in every direction all served in World War II. I mean, my uncle Ken survived the I think the U-boats sunk the ship. It was an outfitted passenger ship that was transporting crew, army personnel and crew and other people from, I believe, England to Belgium, maybe. But it was the Leopoldville. There's documentaries and stuff on it. But he's one of the people. He survived the sinking of that ship, And, you know, it was that like a lot of people died. Like to be in the presence of like 1,200 people dying all at the same time. I can't even imagine that. Like that's what like I just can't even wrap my brain around that. But, these are my ancestors. My grandfather was an artillery specialist and drove a tank, in his regiment. I have somewhere, I have like it was actually kind of cute, even though not cute, but like it was after, the war was over, after they were, released and stuff like that from duty. And it's like, basically, it's like a 30 some page, like typed up letter printout. It's like, okay, here's everything that we did in our time during the war. So, it was basically so they would have a document to reference for when they got together with their war buddy drinking buddies to share their stories and stuff, which I thought was kind of adorable. Um, Despite the fact that it was, about war. So I mean, I have somewhere, like I have all his photographs that he took in like in France and Germany during World War II. Um, but yeah, I mean, he was I guess he drove a tank. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, all this stuff. And my other grandfather was in Papua New Guinea. I'm not sure about where the rest of my great uncles were, but yeah, they all fought World War II and survived. Apparently we survived things. I'm starting to notice that thing because didn't get executed at a witchcraft trial. Although I do seem to have because as I'm going through some of those early colonists, yeah, there were a lot of people who were lost at sea. A lot of people did not make it because there were some that were kind of back and forth. Like I think the one that was accused of witchcraft during that, I think his either he ended up in the Bastille in France for a while, or his son did, because I think it might have been his son ended up in the Bastille because he couldn't come back because his father was under witchcraft accusations and in jail or something, and ended up in the Bastille in France. So during probably a not so great time to be in the Bastille in France. So, but it just I'm noticing all of these things, and I'm gonna use the power of my autism to connect it all together. But I can show you from this one the Samuel Barton, who was an explorer credited with a significant role in establishment of the region that would later become known as Nashville, Tennessee. So kind of what it does here is it'll what it shows you is it kind of shows you the common ancestor, and then as you scroll down you can kind of see like, okay, well, here's where this guy's line ends, and if you keep scrolling down, yep, we got that whole Bennett line, and then there's a great great grandmother. So there's great great grandmother, there's that guy. So it's interesting, surely. Like I've been, yeah. You love my blingy case. It actually matches my glasses really well. Yeah. So like a lot of this, I'm going through and like verifying information. Like I was just over at my parents last night. I was talking to my mom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember hearing about the Bennett line and stuff like that." So it kind of like confirms, like, okay, so while Bennett is a common name, that those two things kind of do go together. Yeah, my parents have been a big kick out of this too. My mom wants to know if we're connected to anyone on the Titanic because she's always been really fascinated with the Titanic. And not gonna lie, I think we saw the movie Titanic in the theater together about 7 or 8 times when it was out. Because I humbly admit I love disaster movies and period pieces, and the Titanic, best of both worlds. But I digress. And my dad wants to know if we're related to President Zelensky, which would be super cool if we were, but I think we're entirely different regions of Ukraine. Anyway, so like what this all has me thinking about is none of us are all good or all bad. We're a mixture in the middle. So looking at this, we're colonizers and colonized. We're slave owners and slaves because the Slavic medieval slave trade was a thing. we're genocided and genocide, or it's kind of like when you look at these things, you've got both ends of the spectrum in the same story. How do you judge the story on knowing all those facts? Are you going to write everyone off because I had a half third cousin 8 times removed who owned a plantation and had slaves in South Carolina that I've never even ever heard of until now? Is that what it takes to blemish and sully a familial line in perpetuity? Or do with every generation, do we have a chance to do better and to become better people and heal and leave the world a better place than maybe we stumbled into it in? So I'm just waxing poetic about some of this stuff, but it's also, and we're back, but it's also interesting that one family line, one lineage has so much history in it. Whereas, I'm still looking at the other ones because, like, once you get like further up, like I've got stuff going back into like the 1470s, like, but a lot of this depends on the records in the region. I'm sure there was a lot of stuff that was destroyed during World War II. Sure, I know I was talking to someone, since I can't find anything beyond like my great grandparents on the Irish side. Well, someone was saying like, depending on the region that they were from, there was, is it a Dublin or Belfast? There was a fire that like destroyed a lot of those records. So it's just missing information. Um, I mean, there's professional genealogists out there. I mean, if you want to spend several $1,000s on having that done. But I mean, I've been able to cross-reference things to 23andMe, so I know with all of the Germanic relatives, the general regions they come through because that shows up on my 23andMe results. Like I knew we all had, Baden-Württemberg. Um, that's where a lot of our ancestors came from, and like Wiesbaden and a few other places. And I'm also learning as because I have been learning Ukrainian. I just ran out of stuff on lessons on Duolingo until they add more. So I've started like learning. Yeah, I was like, all right, let's see what other languages we want to learn. So I've been learning predominantly German and Romanian. I do have some Romanian. Oh, interesting story. While on the subject of Romania, yeah, I apparently have some ancestors from a now abandoned town in Transylvania, Romania. So I'm just assuming this is the beginning of a story on how um a witchy poo discovers through her genealogical research that their family is vampires. Totally. I used to have I had it removed. I don't know if you can still say. I used to have two moles on my neck. I had them removed a couple years ago. You might see them in older videos, but when I was a kid, I was always like, I knew I'm a vampire because it literally looked like I had a vampire bite in my neck. It's kind of sad to lose them. Oh, so talking about, sorry, going back to the language part of it. So when I started doing German, I was like, oh, my voice sounds normal. Like on a linguistic level, like German just comes to me naturally in a weird way. And it could be just having listened to things like Einstürzende Neubauten and Rammstein for the past like 30 some years. I mean, I do listen to a lot of Germanic music, so I'm sure some of it slipped in that way, but it just comes natural to me. Like when I took the little like I think like, my Ukrainian score on Duolingo is like 25. I started German at like a level 10 because I just already had known so much of it. And when I'm speaking German, it sounds more natural than me speaking English in some way. Because I think we have different phoneme sets. And what our phoneme sets are, I'm sorry, this video is very long and hitting all sorts of random topics. If you're still watching, kudos to you. Um, we have different phoneme sets. So where we speak, we form different words in different parts of our mouth. So I remember this with a friend of mine who was born here, but his mother was from the Balkans, and he had a more Balkan Germanic thing. When he spoke German, holy fuck! Like it was like I would have assumed he was a native German speaker. Like that had like from Germany, had spent his entire life in Germany because he just had the natural phoneme set for it. Um Even like my ex-husband, he spent the first couple years of his life living in Egypt when his parents were on sabbatical, and he has a more Arabic phoneme set. So in his case, when we say S, what part of your mouth when you say make an S sound? It's more in the front for me. So S, it's like right here. But in the Arabic, the S sound is further back on the tongue, the way it's formed. So you have some linguistic things like that. So for me, being able to speak German, like almost comes like weirdly natural to me. And I was like, I'm learning Romanian. I don't I'm not a fan of the Romance languages, and Romanian out of all the Eastern European Romania out of all the Eastern European countries is the only one with a Romance language, and it's very different. The I don't like the way they did it on um Duolingo. I don't know if they used AI for the voice and stuff, but it just sounds weird and like very gutter. Like I don't know, because when you listen to the language being spoken, it's beautiful, but for some reason, however Duolingo did it, it's like bleh. It just sounds like someone's like trying to throw up, and it's a beautiful language. But I've been doing Romanian, um, a little bit Polish. Polish isn't too bad. I can pick up Polish now a little easier. I can't visually parse it sometimes, but a lot of the words in Ukrainian and Polish are same. It's just the Ukrainian words could be in Cyrillic and Polish is going to be using I guess the Latin alphabet or Arabic. I don't forget. That's Arabic numerals, whatever the regular alphabet we use is. There's a lot of inflections and stuff or accents and stuff. Did a little bit of Czech and Hungarian. I didn't like Hungarian for some reason. And also learning Russian just solely so I can have properly grammatical Russian insults. That is important to me as a Ukrainian. But so I'm going to talk more. I probably will do some more videos over time about working with my ancestors and this, process, like how specifically how I do things to honor and venerate my ancestors and like a lot of, the Slavic stuff and books I have and family um trinkets and stuff. Like I feel so blessed to have what I do have. Like I have all my grandmother's like photos and archives. My brother and I need to get together sometime and go through what we have um to kind of get some of those things sorted. So, I guess the point here is in closing to wrap up somehow. Every family line is going to have a different story. And especially if you're in the United States, you're going to be very mixed. And honestly, even before, you know, we have to look at the fact that humans were and still are nomadic people. It is no different now if I decide, like, I moved from the Lehigh Valley, where I was born and grew up. I spent half my life in Philadelphia, which was 50 miles away. People go to college, people go and move across the country all the time. We're nomadic people. So people move around. That happens. That's the thing. I may not have to go, like, invade a country to go to college, but that's kind of but that's the process of human evolution of what we do and how we do it is yeah, okay, we don't have to, go, to go for me to move from Philadelphia here, I didn't have to go invade where I live now and, kick someone out of their house to go live in their home. Rent an apartment because that's what we do now. Um, but things are different and we can't judge what we know now, they did not know and had no means of knowing it. I'll use an example of this because this one comes up sometimes in the Russian propaganda against Ukraine. This is World War II. Germany and Poland are here. Germany takes over Poland and all of that here. So here's the big Third Reich. Here's Ukraine, and here's Stalin's Soviet Union. So here's Ukraine. You've got three choices: die, hang out with, be on the side with the Germans, or be on Stalin's side. When your choices are death, Hitler, or Stalin, what do you choose? At some point, and you're not at this time, there's no social media. They're not probably getting newspapers and stuff like that. Like the access to ongoing news. Yeah, sure, there were news reels, but and stuff, but like it did like they wouldn't have had the information to know. And a lot of those things didn't come out until later. They didn't really know about like a lot of like the concentration camp and death camp stuff until later. After the liberate after the liberation. So, it's easy to judge things knowing what we know now, but in every one of those generations, did they know that they were doing good or doing bad? And sometimes historically, something that might not seem horrible in intention in the moment turns around, and 500 years later you're like, oh my god, that's the worst thing ever. Um and right now in 2025, a couple hundred years from now, provided the planet's still here, your ancestors are going to look back at you and probably be like, oh ew, you lived in Trump's America. Oh god, what kind of, I wonder, they might not know um what, side of history you were on. um so that can change over time, you know so trying to place things with the 2025 sensibility and what we know now, and taking into fact that a lot of this was unknown. Like do I know what my neighbor across the street is doing right now? No. But if I was friends with them on Facebook, I could probably see what they were doing there. But the access and availability of information was not the same. We can't look at something. I mean, yes, we can analyze it and study it and see how to do better now, but it's not always clear cut as to where that line, and that line can move a lot in the judgment of good versus evil, I guess. So I'm just leaving that with some of these thoughts to think of. If you guys are doing your own ancestor work, or answer to, or want to understand how other people do ancestry work, like this is my ancestry work. This is where I'm at right now as of September 2025. It may change greatly. I may get some wisdom that I didn't previously have, or I will connect to my ancestors in a way that I haven't previously before. And I'm starting to feel that pull. Like my calling right now, I know this is my calling. And this comes from my ancestor work, and it comes from my ancestors. My Ukrainian ancestors came to this area mostly from the Transcarpathian, like the Carpathian mountain range in Western Europe, Western Ukraine, and the Galicia region also in Western Ukraine, along the Carpathian Mountains, which I just made the connection the other day. The reason it's called Transcarpathia is because it runs from Ukraine into Transylvania in Romania. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why it's called that. Again, I'm telling you, this genealogical research is going to prove we're vampires. My grandfather, and I think both great grandfathers, I'm not sure about great uncles, but a lot of my family worked for the Bethlehem Steel Company. They helped build this country. I mean, Bethlehem Steel, Pittsburgh, all those steel areas, like that's what built America back then and helped modernize things, going back, pre and post war. Um, what I am feeling called to do in my life, I don't know how I'm going to facilitate this, but maybe this is my retirement plans. Maybe this is my fleeing the country to get away from gestures around it, all this bullshit. But I feel called by my ancestry to go home. That someday I will return to Ukraine. Whether someone spreads my ashes there or I go there and whatnot, I feel called to go home to help rebuild Ukraine after the war. That's what I want to do. And I would love nothing more than to settle in a small Carpathian village, maybe be a vampire, and just have my books. I could get some like mountain goats and stuff and sheep and cats and just have a simple life. Get back to what matters most, you know? But yeah, that's what I'm feel that's where I'm going with this. That's what I feel. The connection to me with who I am as a person. I am an Eastern European, Slavic, Ukrainian gal. I that's who I am. And that's the part of my ancestry that resonates with me the most, probably because it's the part that I was raised in. So, I mean, it's a lot of things. I see so many similarities and so many different things. And I could go on for this and tell you stories for hours and hours, but I've been talking for a while. My mouth is getting very dry and scratchy. So I'm gonna cut out here, but I probably will be making more videos talking about the ancestry because this is part of my journey too. And that's what I like to do. I like to share what I am doing, what my story is, how I work with the spirits I work with, how I do ancestor work. I haven't really talked about that whole much on here. So, you know what I'm going to say here, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. Be sure to follow us on social media. Sign up for e-newsletter so you always know what's going on. Staying abreast of product launches, news, new videos, and whatnot. Thank you, and I love you all. Bye.